What's up, everybody? My name is Tim Roswick, and today we're talking about constraints and rules in game design. This is something that I've only kind of recently come into contact with. Doing a lot of design stuff and working on longer term projects has taught me that it's not the same as a game jam project, right? Like game jam stuff can come in super quick. You only got a weekend, you got to push stuff out, you got to change stuff, you got to mess with stuff, and because the timeline is so small, you really don't have time to do stuff wrong or to figure out like which direction to go or to play other games and get inspiration from those. But when it comes to longer projects, stuff can get boring, right? Like you can play your game 100 or 1,000 times and then end up playing a different game and like, oh, I kind of want the game to feel like that, and tweak stuff. And then you tweak stuff and you got to go and change all the levels, and you change all the levels and that whole cycle can happen again. I've been through the cycle multiple times now with my current project, and I've been through it with other projects as well. And it seems like anything that's longer than a few months tends to suffer from this like syndrome where like I just want to mess with stuff and I want to change stuff up because I'm bored, or I lose confidence in it because it's just not great. And I've really recently tried to embrace the idea of design pillars and kind of rules for designing stuff, because if you don't have rules on what the game should be, if you don't know what the game should be, and you experiment too often, especially when you're in the content pipeline past the prototype phase, you can end up just kind of changing the game forever. And so at some point you have to say, no, this is what the game is. We're going to lock it down, and here's the thing. And so I found a perfect example from an old cartoon called Roadrunner, which I used to watch as a little kid, and I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was amazing. If you've ever seen Roadrunner, basically it's a stupid little cartoon that it's about this roadrunner, this coyote, and they're constantly fighting, and there's just conflict, and the coyote's always trying to catch the roadrunner, and he's coming up with crazy different plans and doing weird stuff, and it's just kind of weird and ridiculous. And so one of the cool things about this, though, one of the really interesting things that I found online was the rules of the Roadrunner by the actual animator that made the cartoon. And he had 11 rules, 11 of them that he would always stick to no matter what. And he made these in the beginnings not only so that he knew what the cartoon was, but so that the other people that were animating or the other people that were setting up the cartoon never, ever, ever got it wrong. And I found this really, really interesting, because stuff that you kind of took for granted when you watch the cartoon, like where is it? I saw it. Everything, all the tools, weapons, and mechanical conveniences must be obtained from Acme Corporation. Everything that he collects is always from the Acme Corporation. I always wondered why. Like, what kind of corporation sells all these weapons and tools and stuff? And it turns out that's an actual rule that he had. Roadrunner cannot harm the coyote except by going meep meep, which happens in almost every episode multiple times. No outside force can harm the coyote, only his own ineptitude and failure of Acme products. Trains and trucks were an exception from time to time. The coyote could stop any time if he were not a fanatic. No dialogue ever except meep meep and yowling in pain. Like, I found this really, really, really interesting, because if you look at all these rules, essentially what you're looking at is every episode ever of the cartoon. Like, this is, with all these rules, anybody out there can make their own version of this cartoon, and it would be very similar to the original. And it's very specific. It's very actionable. Like, there's some things that you just can't do. There's some things that you always do, so on and so forth. And I really, really love this rule set, and I feel like we should apply this more to games. And so one of the things that I've actually started doing in Phallophobia is coming up with rules like this, very specific to what the game is and what the game isn't, which is, I think, just as important, right? And like for Phallophobia, it's just been a struggle between a bunch of different similar games, and I play them and I'm like, oh, well, I should lean that way. I play this other one, I should lean that way. And I just kind of get lost. So I started coming up with actionable rules for my game that I feel like encompass what I'm trying to create. And then if there's ever a decision where I don't know, should I do this or should I do this, or should it feel this way or should it feel this way, I know that that's probably an area that I need to approach with a rule. And it doesn't mean that rules can't be broken. Like even some of these Roadrunner rules were broken from time to time, which I think is good. I don't think there's ever a black and white situation, but at the very least, this kind of gives you something to guide your game along. And like I said, for shorter projects, for game jam stuff, week or two, I really don't think this is necessary. Like you just iterate and you find out what's fun and you just make something cool. But for longer projects, they have a way of just morphing. And if you don't write stuff like this down, you don't get a lot done. So this is something I wanted to share because it's kind of, it goes along with a little bit of the research that I've been doing to try and find ways to like actually design a game and then stick to it through the content phase. Because the problem I have with bigger content games that I'm making now is that like I go through this design phase and I'm like, okay, the game's good. And then you go through this long content phase, right? Like I already built the game engine. I didn't build the engine, but like I built the sandbox and stuff and everything's like working and the jumping and the enemies and all that stuff works. I just got to assemble it all into levels. And that's like one of the longest processes. So when I'm in that content phase, it's really easy to just like get bored and like want to add some crazy lasers or a double jump or like just all kinds of stuff. And I start second guessing and then going back and tweaking movement. And if I tweak movement, I got to tweak the levels. And it's just, I've done it way too many times. It's a mistake that I happen to keep making. So this is an approach I'm taking, kind of set up rules and stuff, design rules for the actual game. I'm going to have ones for some art stuff as well to just kind of keep me focused and keep the style consistent. And I think it'll be useful. And if you're in a longer project and you find yourself getting distracted or tweaking things or changing things too often, I want you to consider coming up with rules like this. Design rules seem to be very effective for me so far in kind of keeping with what I want to do. And I think the important thing is to write them down. You don't just want to have them in your head. You want to have them actually listed somewhere. I have mine in a document, but I also have mine listed in the sticky note app in Windows. So it's there when I boot up every time. And so it's right there. That's all I got. If you guys got any opinions on this, I want to pass the conversation off to you. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there are additions to this that I missed, or there are things that you want to add, or if you got any questions, let me know in the comments down below. But once again, my name is Tim Roswick, and I'll see you again tomorrow.